Hey, welcome everyone to the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of February 12th, 2024. Members of the public can be present in the council committee room during the meeting, and also public members can observe the meeting via Zoom. The webinar will be recorded and published to the city's YouTube site. And so today, welcome Dan Bradley. We have Communities in Bloom here to present to us, and I'll hand it over to you, Dan.
Yeah, Mayor, Council. So you already got the attachment what is on the agenda, and so we basically included the proposed budget, which is similar as it was last year. There's a couple of minor additions and changes. And then a report of some of the issues that we should be dealing with next year, year after, maybe a 5-year plan, you know, like the trees and so forth. I'm not gonna really go into details of everything. I mean, you have the report in front of you. And we will have to discuss this even with whoever's gonna be the public works manager when that time comes.
Okay.
So I'm basically here to answer any questions. I mean, our budget last year, I think after the GST reading, I think we were $800 over, so. Or one or two budget actually managed to stay fairly on track. Could be a difficult year. But then every year is like that, so. So any questions you guys will have?
Well, I just want to say it was a really good report. I don't think you missed very much of the work that you do for the committee in this report. I don't know if council has any questions before I go into my, okay, Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Dan. I was just reviewing some of the details of the proposed budget,
Mhm.
and I see that only $1,000 of the budget is allocated to perennials, but $11,000 is allocated for annuals. Is there a way to bring that up to a, more balanced approach to spend, because
Which item was that?
plant cost,
Yeah,
Because- annuals just tend to be, they're
Right.
done, right? And is there a way to find, I know that there's different color themes, et cetera, per year, but is there something that we can supplement that with a color that can consistently be complementary to other additional color themes that are in there as a way to not necessarily have to spend as much on the annuals per year?
That's a good question. Actually, we are working on a project, and that is to acquire, hopefully for free, an old greenhouse
Mhm.
and move it to our compound. But for instance, our Canada lilies, which cost about $5 to $10 a piece if you had to buy them, for the past 5-6 years, we've been keeping them, overwinter them, then in the spring we cut them, put it in water, and then we replant them. So we haven't bought Canada lilies for several years.
Mhm.
We can do that with a lot of the other plants as well,
Mm.
but we need a space.
Mm.
And we did use a portion of the Columbia Valley greenhouse during the winter.
Mhm.
It wasn't heated, but it was enough, it kept from freezing anyway. And we would like to continue doing that, but now it's closed, so we can't access the property.
Mhm.
Hence, we are looking at the possibility to move the greenhouse that's closer to the road to the compound, and it'll fit perfectly in there.
Okay, so is that a yes or no that you could allocate more of the funding towards perennials?
Yes,
Yes, you could allocate more towards perennials,
yeah.
okay.
The total cost, roughly 40,000 for our plant costs.
Mhm.
Because when we do the budget, we don't know what it's gonna be. I mean, we put the order in October, November, because they had to put their orders in, and they don't know what the cost's gonna be until probably May.
Mhm.
So it could vary. Some years it goes down a little bit, some years up. I mean, that's all depending what type of plants they can get. We buy our perennials from Braun, the wholesaler in Grand Forks.
Mhm.
And so we put in a pretty substantial order every year. City may need some trees or whatever the case be, so we try to get it together so we can save in shipping while we go over there to pick it up.
Right.
Pick it over.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I just have two other quick questions for, Mayor Jones. I see that, wages have been, something of, substance in the budget.
Mhm.
Do you guys work with the Peers program?
Yes,
Okay, and how many people do you have through the Peers program?
we had between 5 and 7 last year.
Okay, and is there an opportunity to increase that by chance?
It depends on how many people they have available,
Mhm.
because there are certain things that they can or cannot do, so.
Because they're not necessarily getting paid that same higher end wage per se.
They have a set rate,
Okay.
yes, that's paid by them.
Okay, and then the other question I had is also, is there a way that, you guys could work with both, the alternate school as well as Crow in, getting some students for volunteerism for their community hours that they need for graduation to come and assist with that? Cause I see that like weeding and all of that, that's a lot, to do as well as watering. Is there a way that we can
The
incorporate engagement with the kids?
Yeah, the alternate school we use every year.
Great.
But Crow, I mean, they had tech spent over $26,000 up there, doing the fencing, the greenhouse and everything else. And right now it's in the dump
Mhm.
because they didn't have a teacher to look after it.
Mhm.
And so it fell apart.
Right.
It would have been perfect if we would have known, we could have probably taken that greenhouse and used it,
Mhm.
but
So there is an opportunity to work with them again for their kids, for
if
volunteer
we
hours.
have the right teacher out there that is willing to work with us, yes.
Or one of their counselors that they would be over the
Yeah.
oversight from you guys to be able to report to on certain days for assistance
Well,
or something.
One of the problems with the high schools or any school is they have basically 45 minutes
Mhm.
available. And then you have to figure out transportation or the distance they have to walk to the project and back.
Mhm.
You subtract that, they may only have 20 minutes
Mhm.
or half an hour at the max at the work site.
Mm.
So unless you get them for 2 or 3 hours,
Mhm.
they're really, really tough to utilize them.
Just looking at
Yeah,
options
yeah.
to keep costs down, that's all.
We tried watering with volunteers, but due to the fact we have to work, partly night shift, we are not allowed to work safe to use volunteers.
Mm.
And working alone, we have to have a fairly stringent working alone policy,
Mhm.
so.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
That's all.
Thank you. Counselor Benson?
Thanks, Dan. In your report, you talked a little bit that it may not be a competition year.
Mhm.
With that, and you talked about a couple areas where the cost would be, not included in the budget. Anything in terms of areas you'd prioritize to lessen the budget if it's a non-competition year in terms of the overall flowers and plants?
Not per se for the flowers, I mean, that's a fixed cost, because we still have to do it. Where we could save a little bit of money if we decide, and this hasn't gone to our group yet, which will probably happen next week, hopefully. You don't have to bring the judges in. So you save on hotel, you save on, no, that's maybe some meals,
Mhm.
that's it. But we also like to have a volunteer appreciation event every year. So we tend to combine that with the judges, so whether they come in or not, we like to have something for, to say thank you to everyone that's gonna help us, because the city used to have a volunteer event every year. It would be in the Comico gym. And, that was dropped about 10 years ago. And we haven't had anything since then, so we decided to try something for our group anyway.
Okay. But in terms of like the plants and
No, it doesn't make a difference, no,
Would the team still go to the conference if?
no.
No, okay.
It's in PEI this year, and it's a long distance travel. I usually use air miles, but I've been there for three times, and I will be in Europe at that time. Anyway.
Thank you, Stan. Councillor Butler,
Yeah.
did you have your hand up?
Yeah, good, thanks, Mayor Jones. One of the things like, that I noticed in the report year over year, this is actually directed more towards, Mr. McClure, Mrs. Butler, is the loss of the the urban canopy in the downtown core. So the report cites 58 trees that have been lost over the time. Is it possible, and just also noticing like with the renovations of the, Crown Point, a large tree was taken out in front of that space, and then with the new gas stations and the Dairy Queen, a lot of trees were taken down. Is it possible that we could have a presentation by Public Works at a future meeting for a plan to, and if there is a plan to, what we're doing on that urban canopy, especially in the downtown core with things getting hotter?
Mhm.
And so thank you, Mr. Roddick, for pointing it out in your report. Is that, you have 58 in one spot and 26 in another, is that 58 downtown trail, or is that sort of?
They get downtown. Yeah.
Mhm. I noticed in the report that we received earlier, last term, that they had a cooler communities plan where they brought in those umbrellas and hung them. I'm almost wondering, it's not umbrellas, it's the shade, yeah, that might be a neat idea too, to bring down a little bit of, to cool down the downtown area a bit if the trees aren't working, right? Yeah.
There's very few shade areas downtown,
Mhm.
except for Jubilee Park.
Yeah, Councillor Hanson.
I was just gonna say further to Councillor Butler's comment, I actually did reach out to Harry Measure in regards to the crime prevention through environmental design principles, and asked him for some thoughts on additional canopy coverage, tree coverage in the downtown core, and ideas and suggestions, which apparently it's stuck in his outbox right now and has to wait till he gets home to send it over to me, but he definitely has some thoughts to, and I'll bring that forward to council once received.
And I just wanted to make note too, I love the idea that the flower color this year is the Smoky Deer's orange. Is that a for sure, or is it, yeah, that'll be
Across
fun.
Canada.
Across Canada, yeah, that's great. Dan, on your first page of your report, item number 4. Has there been any discussion with other communities of how to resolve that situation? Has that been a topic of discussion at any of your,
No,
Convention?
it was a little bit from Nanaimo. But I can feel that question through our the national board and see if there's anything out there.
that is a problem for our community? I just wondered if you had any ideas.
Well, we'll have to get rid of it somehow, but I mean, we have to work around it and, that's, it's an issue, but,
Yeah, okay, and Councillor Cashel.
Go ahead.
No, you had your hand up
Yeah.
first.
In November of 2022, for the record, Mayor Jones appointed me to be on the city's rep for the Communities in Bloom Committee, and I've been attending, I think I attended all meetings, committee meetings, and I've been out many times or several times working with Dan and Rachel Brown, the contractor, and many volunteers on this program. I support the program. I really appreciate, and I think I can speak on behalf of Mayor and Council and the constituents of Trail for the work that you've been doing for the last 22 years, Dan, carrying this torch and running this program. I know you're a person of integrity. I know that this report comes, I accept it in its entirety as being a credible report. I'm prepared to make a motion to, I don't know if it's too premature to do that, Mayor Jones, to accept the proposal and put a motion on the floor that we accept the proposal as presented for $140,000.
Well, I think right now we're just receiving a report.
That's all there is today?
Completed,
Okay, I
yeah,
always get
that's
this
all we're
mixed up.
doing
I
today.
apologize.
I appreciate that. No, that's okay. That's
Okay.
good.
Silver second thought.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I just
Yeah.
wanted to not, I had a bit of a situation
Yeah.
last governance committee meeting that kind of is the reason why I'm bringing this up.
No, I
So,
understand.
that being said, thank you for your report, thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you this year as well with the committee
And
members.
we'll find some work for you.
Work, toil in the soil, Dan, that's what we call it. Anyway, thanks, Mr. Rowley. Thank you, Mayor Jones.
You're welcome. Counselor Martin, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mayor Jones. I just want to reiterate what Councillor Cashel said. And Dan, thank you for what you and the communities in Bloom do for the city trail to make it look pretty nice. Really, really well done.
Good job.
Just a question, because I don't know, where's your compound?
As you drive into this public works yard,
Okay,
if you look down just before you go in the gate, there's two sea cans.
yeah,
The CDS has one, and we have the other one,
okay,
and then it's all fenced off, so we don't go into the
okay,
public works at all.
okay.
Kind of keep
And
separate.
thank you. And just to finish, I really like your idea about the trees as well. I think that's a great idea.
5 and 10 year plan, whatever you decide to do.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you, Dan, for coming today and the work that you're doing. And
We'll bring that back to the committee.
yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 2, general governance and finance. We have before you the correspondence policy. And I will hand this over to General Manager of Corporate Services, Ms. Butler.
Thank you. Through the chair. Before you is a draft. I don't know how complete it is because I'm not sure what all the issues were facing council with correspondence handling. So I present it to you and am open for amendments if it is not covering the points that you needed it to. So I put that on the floor
Okay.
for your discussion.
So the recommendation is on the floor or on the table, sorry. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? And then we can open discussion. Counselor Benson, Counselor Cashel. Okay. Any questions or comments, Counselor Benson?
I think for me, and I just didn't see it in here, you talk about like the logging of the communication and assigning it to someone. If there's something that could be like within a time limit responded to the community member person that we've received it and we're working on it so that they know that it's been.
Yes,
I
that
see.
automatically happens.
Oh, okay.
We send something within that 24
Oh,
hour
okay,
span
okay.
saying we've received your communication
Yeah.
and it's been addressed to this person and this is the contact information
Okay.
for that person.
Okay.
So if what happens is if that person now emails us back and says, we haven't heard from that
Right.
person, we can follow up and say, hey.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Counselor Cashel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jones. I'll just say thank you to Ms. Butler for addressing this motion in such a timely, efficient manner and for a very well-prepared report. I appreciate it and thank you for doing so. And I have no further comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Cashel. Anyone else have any comments? Today, well, we have time. You can take it home and go over it a little bit more because we don't have to finalize it until the next council meeting, February 26th. So the recommendation is on the table. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
But Mayor, Your Worship, but there is concerns or questions, it would be great not to find that out on the kind of table when we're
Yeah.
bringing it forward. That's all I just say, if you have any emails or suggestions.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 2.2, the Abilities Awareness Advisory Committee. So that report is also in your agenda. And it's a report to council for information. I don't know if anyone has any questions on it.
You're through
You want to-
worship. Yeah,
Thank
I've
you.
got a small PowerPoint presentation that I was going to do it at this meeting and then the report comes forward at the regular. so that we can adopt it today and get it moving. So I'm just trying to figure out how to do this. So much. Have to share. Good. Okay, thank you. So, the Accessibility BC Act. So this act came in June 2021. And, since then, a lot of municipalities have been striving to meet the regulations, but it's been very difficult. So the act requires that governments, prescribe to an accessibility committee, an accessibility plan, and a mechanism for feedback on accessibility. So, the reason for this is to create a culture where public service organizations are actively seeking to identify and remove barriers through establishing the committee, creating strategies to improve accessibility within their organization and community, and establish means for feedback on effectiveness of those strategies. So when we talk about creating strategies to improve accessibility within their organization and community, we're not only talking about, safe crosswalks, but we're also talking about things within our organization, so that when we're going out for job postings or we're creating new positions, that we're thinking about accessibility when we are considering those things. So Accessibility BC Act, what does it mean? Creating an environment that allows for inclusion and independence for everyone through work, play, and day-to-day. And barriers can be attitudinal, physical, communicative, systematic, technological, and sensory. So when you think about that, that encompasses an awful lot of things that happen. So it's understanding why before we used to talk about accessibility and it was just about, making sure we had safe crosswalks and washrooms. It's now gone far larger than that. So what does the City of Trail need to do? First thing we need to do is adopt a terms of reference for an accessibility committee. We need to go out and find members of our community to sit on that committee. And then we also need to provide a feedback mechanism, most likely through our website. And then we need to create the plan. So, and we need to do this PDQ because we are a little behind. So, about the committee. So the committee is an advisory committee. And it's to provide advice and information regarding accessibility barriers on future planning, projects, municipal services, policies, and facilities. So again, that is where staff, it's imperative on us that when we're coming up with perhaps a new capital project, that we are bringing that forward to the accessibility committee for their view of it and their suggestions on how we can incorporate accessibility into that. So along with reviewing existing municipal services, so, how things are running at the arena or the swimming pool, our policies, our hiring policies, and to remove any of those barriers. And then to provide recommendations regarding possible improvements to our buildings, facilities, policies, and services, which would assist in providing accessibility for all citizens. And this could easily be maybe even a pool activity where we're bringing people in that are perhaps in wheelchairs and there's a time for them to come in and have swimming lessons. So just being really broad when we're thinking about accessibility. How to access the committee. So committees are organized on an ad-need basis. So whenever somebody has a project or something coming forward and we need their opinion and we want some input, the corporate officer will set up that meeting. And we're actually looking at this as very broad. So it could even be something to do with communities in bloom, right? That sensory type situation. So really thinking broad. So, and then the Accessibility BC Act. So the plan is the part that is gonna take some time. So what we are hoping is we get the committee up and running and we have our first meeting and we set those terms of reference. And then the next thing will be, we will be looking at probably a consultant to come in and help us draft that plan. And so the plan, of course, is gonna identify all of these things in this slide. I have seen plans that are 6 pages and I've seen plans like Whistler's that it's 120 pages. So it really will depend on, as somebody who is a professional in this field, helping us draft this plan. Because it is important. It does have to be reviewed at least once every 3 years. So it is a living document that will continually receive updates. And so the city is currently exploring opportunities for grant funding towards creating a plan with the intention of being finalized in 2024. That will be the end of 2024. And working on an accessibility information page for our website. So Claire, our communications manager, is looking at that right now. And that's it. Any questions about where we're going? Why we're going?
Councillor Butler.
In the terms of reference, are there ones that you can get your hands on, or are we reinventing?
There is a terms of reference attached to the report going to the regular meeting for adoption
Okay, sorry.
tonight. Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing we're very lucky about going down the pipe a little bit late.
Yeah,
There's
totally,
lots of examples out there.
Sweet.
Councillor Benson.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. I sat through one of the workshops at the AKBLG last year on this, and they talked about that in terms of the committee. There's no obligation in terms of like the size of the committee. What do you think is a
We're setting that through our terms of reference, so up to 11.
up to 11? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, when, is this like good timing with like the OCT coming out, or is this a completely different? Like, is this something that could mix well as we?
I think it could be, pieces of it certainly could be part of our OCD, and as Brother spoke to, is having it as one of those components that we consider going forward if we're doing a development. Sorts of sensory or visual, who knows, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but yes, that would be, I think that's something that we would probably put on our OCP, that maybe it goes to the committee almost through those sorts of
Yeah.
language in it. Yeah.
Cool, okay, thanks.
Councillor Hanson.
I remember the same presentation at AKBLG, and I wonder, is there still, I thought they talked about funding available for developing an accessibility plan. Is there still funding available?
So I've been in contact with the province and we've been in contact with the consultant that the province has. And they were waiting on, again, some of the documents that Ms. Butler is bringing forward right now to kind of be up and ready. And they are ready. They actually come to this area quite frequently as they go and ski in Panorama. They are a chair skier. And so they're an individual that is in a wheelchair and certainly sees the world in a different way than a regular able-bodied. And so she's very excited because it's not uncommon. She's in Vancouver, but travels the way and is in this area. So hoping as we get this first step kind of underway, that we'll be able to engage with her and kind of find out what's happening on that end. But yeah, they had talked about funding, how much exactly and how much she would, how much her plan would cost. We do need to assist a bit, and we'll be able to speak to that hopefully in the next little while.
Wonderful, thank you.
Ms. Butler, is there any guidelines as to what groups we would reach out to for representation on this committee? Has there been any, I guess there's other committees that have been formed, right?
Yeah,
Already, so.
yes, through the chair, it is also outlined in our terms of reference on how the committee should be made up to keep it broad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. If there's no other questions, that's it. Moving on.
Yes, thank you for
Exciting.
getting us caught up. It's, I'm super grateful. I think it was certainly something that was hanging out the side of my desk and I had conversations, but it's also, as General Manager spoke to, it's always a special, in just even our region, in sharing plans, sharing what people are planning. There's just not that competition. It's like, here's what we've done and helping people out. So we're very grateful to our regional municipalities that have assisted us. And so, I'll just hand out a document so that council can follow along. We will have it on the screen, of course, and so it's on Zoom for those that watch it later and those that we don't have anybody hanging with us at the minute. Really glad to be, in a much healthier place here on a number of different levels with regards to being able to talk budget and discuss some of the things that we're seeing as the year end moving along. I get some input. I mean, we're still a little bit early and also just also reflecting the fact that I've taken some vacation time. So wanted to get in front of council, just on intro and some of the things that I'm seeing. So we go to the next first slide there. Yeah, so again, just the process. We're sort of in that kind of first four, which can be somewhat cyclical in the sense that staff need get some work done by the finance staff on what the asks are. Talk to staff and say, no, I don't think we can do that. And then bring kind of presentations to council. So right now, this is just our intro sort of stage. My expectation is in March that we will have more time with council just on the nuts and bolts of the actual budget for 2024. Of course, when we get to that stage, council will debate and talk about items that are in the budget and obviously the always anticipated proposed tax rate. Then we'll have the opportunity when we get to those numbers of going out to the public and getting any feedback that may come in for council. Have that information brought to council to be thought about and debated or discussed and to see if there's any changes, and if not, then we get into our bylaw adoption and introduction. May 15th is when we have to have it completed. So again, we're in a healthier stage than we were last year, so which is a very, very good news story. Next slide. Just again, too, I think it's always a good reminder of sort of talking about just some numbers wise. Our operational revenues are 27 million, our operational expenses are about 23.5. But the revenue over expenses, you can see on the map there, but that also goes to pay down debt, which of course, you've got, yes, the interest expense, which we call the operational costs, but your actual principal debt is also going to be accounted for there. Again, you can see that our general fund operational expenses is about 21 million, and we've got about $15 million in taxation. Now, again, these will be updated on our slide too as we kind of move forward. The 1% tax increase produces about $159,000 in income. You can see again just sort of what our regular full-time employees, and we do have some part-time roles, just particular strong with having our aquatic staff and some of the other safety. So move to the next slide. So some 2023 highlights, and I thought it was important to discuss this because it's sort of one of those things that, of course, people go, oh my goodness, we haven't had a lot of snow, didn't have a lot last year, even a good snow year compared to the year before. This year as well, we're not having a big, snow year. And there are benefits to that financially, but they're not at the level that council may think. And what you will see a lot of times is that when you do have less of a snow year, is that keep the same amount of employees. We don't just say, hey, by the way, we don't have any snow and we lay people off. So what you tend to see in not just our municipality, but in most municipalities, is you will see a reallocation. So maybe the public works budget will be under, but then you'll see, say, the parks budget being over because we've got staff doing park benches or collecting leaves or doing other work that otherwise they would be driving a snowplow or a loader, kind of dealing with snow. So kind of a value added in a sense, but sometimes when you look at it and you say, oh my goodness, that's quite a bit under budget. It is, except that we will also see that we've had some over budget in some other areas in our recreation budget that accounts for staffing, again, being in other places and doing work like that. So again, great news, just not quite at the back to pre-COVID kind of thing on the airport, but certainly there's some really positive things happening there. As far as where we're at for revenues and in particular, the hope here and the relationship that we are working hard on with Pacific Coastal, our partner there on, again, they've got the new Saab plane coming, well, not the new, but the Saab is back, I guess, at certain flights, not all. We're certainly hoping and advocating, how do we get you to bring that in all the time? And so there's a lot of work in the background going in, working with our partners. We talked about just things that they do and how we might be able to advocate on their behalf in different areas, but again, just a real positive to see that the airport where it's at. Memorial Center revenue was 32% higher than budgeted and 6% higher than the previous year. Certainly seeing ice usage up, which is a very good thing for us to see. When we were doing the budget last year, even then, we were just starting to get near the tail of interest increases. And so even in my budget, you can see that we're on the operating fund itself, that a good healthy budget, and we are over that this year. So that's a positive thing, but it's also one I just caution that rates go up, rates go down. So one of the ones that you just sort of go, well, then we solved our problem, we'll just always have this sort of interest income, and that can depend as well, fluctuations on what's happening with your surpluses, what's happening with your balances, or do you have balances, especially on the capital side, it can be very positive if you're earning some good interest income, but then as you take on a big project, then all of a sudden those are in drop, so you can't depend on that as one that would be a stable, ongoing, all the time guarantee. And we are certainly seeing, although again, a few blips in the market data. Everyone thought that by March, we would already start to see rates going down, and doesn't look like that's kind of happening at this point in time. Now, again, can that change in a hurry? Maybe, but also just the fact that you're seeing jobs numbers in Canada are still pretty healthy. That's putting sort of Bank of Canada on pause. I do suspect that, some people were saying that we get like 5 to 7 cuts, maybe we get 2 to 4. And so again, that bodes well for us, I think, with a healthy balance and being able to earn that interest income that we do. So that's a good news story for us. A good news, but I think that, our community would prefer that we had the RCMP officers to kind of fulfill that. We are seeing right now, about $450,000 savings in our protective service budget, but that's because of understaffing. We know how hard our sergeant works in our area and our staff members work, and that's also very difficult on them since they don't have a full complement. We do know that they've had some special status through the RCMP where if someone wants to come to this location, are able to apply here easily than they can for other locations. And so we're hoping, the sergeant is hoping as well, that he can start filling up some of the areas there. There's a great deal of strain. So, but again, we take that into consideration. Obviously, one of the things that was very successful for our community was the Silver City Days after a COVID-induced hiatus. And so, again, already underway with 2.0, stronger and better Silver City Days for 2024. So some concerns, building permit revenue was under budget and significantly less than it was in 2022. Sometimes there are the ebb and flows that go on, whether it's hospital tech, those sorts of big projects can have a big factor on where our development revenue comes from. This year, yeah, it's not we're not great, but we also know that we've had lots of inquiries. We sense that with the provincial changes that are coming to zoning, number of units on properties, that this could be an area that we start to see some additional benefit from, I guess, on that. One has to be careful because you can get the benefit of, yes, we're getting development, but then that can also be bad if we have to improve all kinds of infrastructure as well on the other side of it. But those are early days for right now. Property insurance has been unbelievable. I don't know if any of you had even just do your vehicle these days. The ICB's even going down, it's going back up again. So there's some stresses there that we're seeing. I definitely am looking over the statement of values, and I say that means statement of values is where's the insurance company at? You usually get a valuation on your properties, whether it's this building or the Memorial Center. And certainly been looking at that, looking at what our deductible amount should be, looking for areas that we can find savings. We definitely, our renewal is in May of this year, every year it is, I should say, but it's in the middle of May. So I will be working hard to see areas where we can maybe set a value. Some of the things that are on there sometimes might seem silly, but pump houses, really what you want to know, likely the better way of ensuring that is to insure the pump. The building is usually maybe a cinder block building. Do we need to insure that building itself? Or we also have a reserve on our books for, that has a couple $100,000 in it for insurance and for legal. And that might be an area where we might be able to make some savings and take some pressure off of our increasing property tax insurance. Again, to be clear, that is not just City of Trail, that is everywhere. And, doesn't take much to just watch the news and to see the disasters going on. It's really an industry that is shrinking about how many people do insurance as far as the companies, the number of companies, and they're getting smaller, and so they need to make a return as well. Really positives, I think, happening with the Trail Leisure Aquatic Center. But 2023 is one that we're glad is kind of out the doors. Staff have worked really hard. Our chief, kind of on the facility there, Gabby, worked really hard on getting a number of educational programs to get our staffing back up for lifeguards, and done an excellent job on that. And we're certainly grateful for that. You see the swimming lessons coming back. Of course, we had a failure in the year, and so we really wanted to, again, turn the page, make sure that we're taking care of it. But it's certainly one of the main factors there, just even not having the staffing, is that, being underserviced on providing the lifeguard, having lifeguards, and then not being able to provide swimming lessons. You can see the drop in revenue, but we also just see the drop in service. And we're getting that back on track. But there's good hopes in the future of being open 7 days a week, so we've got good plans there. We see a lot of positivity happening into 2024. Again, in 2023, there's a significant turnover in management staff. That's never easy for any organization. It hasn't been easy on us as well. One of the big ones here, WCB, just the regular premium, and then on top of that, the experience premium is jumped. We're about $90,000 higher. When you think about that, that's almost, we're getting closing 0.75% increase in taxes just to pay for WCB premium. One of the things that really ticked me this year when I saw the new premium was that our experience rating dropped because we've been doing some good work on staying safe. But then the regular premium went up, and then sometimes you want to shake someone and say, what's going on here? We're doing the best that we can. And then, of course, one of the big ones there, out of the finance department, my responsibility was the miscalculation in the RDKB tax requisition, which resulted in a deficit in what we should have recovered or from our community, and so we will have to recover that in 2020. Again, when we look at our opportunities for 2024, pretty exciting. December there, council agreed with the Council of Rossland for a 1-year TRP agreement. And so we're really hoping that that we will see that turn into a much longer agreement. Just some quick numbers too. I know that Rossland reported out, but in the first month there or so in January, saw a $208,000 increase in revenues that we collected from Rossland residents, from about 6,000 in 2023 to almost 19,000 in 18,000 in 2024. So that's really good news. Some of the things we also noticed that the passes went from 32 to 129. So again, just really positive. And again, it's one of those things where the positives and negatives now, when you see like, I'm sorry, the pool was full, we can't get anybody in. So you have success, and yet it also sometimes creates what, I've got my kids down here, finally gonna come, and you've got too many kids in the pool. So anyway, that's one that we're really hoping that we can be successful in working with our great partners up in Rossland to try to make that happen. Also reaching out there to our last area, that's to bring them inside the TRP. That would be another real win for 2024 to kind of turn 2025 into we're all in this together again. One of our big opportunities, and we talked about it a bit earlier, is that the supporting current is we do have a number of requests coming in and attracting, new development, and that's both housing and commercial. I think that will be important for the city. Again, we continue to work with our great partner at the Airport Pacific Coastal, hopefully, and you know, potentially, there's nothing firm so here, but on the number of flights and using the larger plane, and that gets for things that they did note, that January was one of the worst Januaries that they had ever experienced. Again, no surprise there, it wasn't like anybody in the area was having a good time with the weather that we got, both the cold snap and then, of course, you know, it being so mild, and I do wonder, with not as much snow on the ground, does that mean that we get, you know, better reliability, say in March and April, because that's usually when the snow is, you know, temperature wise, where we see less fog, anyway, just something to watch for. A great opportunity here to negotiate a collective agreement that honors and values our union staff. We got great staff here, and we are at the end of our contract, February 29th, and so we started working on a new contract here, and we'll be back to March 1st of 2024. One of the big opportunities and excitements is to kind of restart and get the completion of our 22-year-old OCP. I think it's time for a refresh. I know that it was underway, and of course, it was totally waylaid by the pandemic, and just the numbers and everything that's going on. It's been quite striking just to see when we get some of these documents going, where the numbers are at for housing and sales in 2018, because that's 19 is when your numbers are compared to what the prices and the activity are happening in those number of years. One of the positives as well is that there will be some government funding that has come from the province to assist with OCP and zoning. So I know that that was a huge relief for the general manager, not thinking that all of a sudden she was going to be imploded with that kind of work level. So again, also fortunate that we were already working with WSP on the OCP. So if we were having to get in line with everyone else, I'm glad that we were already kind of ahead of that part. Again, we spoke about this a bit earlier too, if our higher interest rates continue, the city will see strong interest income on our bank deposits, so it's a good news story for the city. This is a unique one here, resolution of a Fortis multi-year incorrect charging for lighting. We've done a lot of effort in our area here to get the proper LED lightings going on, and yet there was sort of, you know, again, with big organizations, there was a question on our side saying, hey, we should be getting the different rate than we have, and then going back and looking like, hey, we changed this area and then this area, and you've been charging us this whole time. So we had staff go through and meticulously talk about when this light came on and when it should have been charged, and that has turned to not only a refund that is kind of being provided, but also just watching basically, I'm gonna say half of what we had budgeted in the past for lighting expenses. That's the kind of difference, so that's a very positive one and a tangible one as well. And again, forest rates will increase over time, but even right now, just seeing the benefit of our street lighting and making those changes, so not only good for the environment and energy wise, but also good for the pocketbook of the city.
Can I ask, how did you figure that out?
I had no part of me, I take no part of that with Public Works and their engineering department. They've been going through and saying, hey, we changed these lights, and hey, comparing your billing and going, you're charging us for the old this style light, and we've done this light.
That's fantastic that they noticed that.
That's totally.
Really,
Yes.
really good.
Yes, yeah, but it took a long time, so not only was it like, hey, we've done this, hey, it's another year.
Yeah, well,
hey, we're another
right.
year, and so you just keep charging us and we're paying it.
Because that actually dates back several years,
Yes, it does.
because all the light bulbs were changed out and use COVID before COVID, yeah, because it was the orange style, which were replaced by the white, which was,
Yeah,
at the time, I recall,
Yeah.
meant to reduce costs.
Yeah.
so it's been a few years.
Yeah, it has been a few years.
So anyway, that just one of those benefits for us. Okay, challenges. One of the big ones here, of course, for this council, they've been through this a number of times, is let's get working with our BHC housing and get this new temporary homeless shelter set up and operating successfully. That's there. Also, a challenge is going to be partnering with our local stakeholders on supporting and managing the vulnerable populations that do not get into the new temporary housing shelter. We know that there are limited beds there, and we have, more individuals in our community than we have beds. And of course, we also know at this table that, some individuals don't feel comfortable and don't want to be in the shelter. But how do we work with them? How do we support them? How do we kind of make sure our residents as well are being supported in this challenging time? Again, challenge here, we got a recruitment of some vacancy in management positions. Again, it's, maybe not as bad over the last couple of years, but it's gonna be important. It's gonna be a key, and it's, we take it on as a challenge to get the right person for the roles here. One of the things that we talked about here is the new limited, on construction revenues. We've been seeing pretty consistent over the last number of years, and when I say new construction, what that means is that you had an empty lot. Then someone builds a home on it. So when that person builds that home on that property, that's not, again, property values going up and down. Because as soon as the properties go up and down, we adjust the mill rate to make sure that we're collecting in the same amount of money or as to whatever the increase is year over year. So that's why when we have a 30% increase in assessed values, we don't get 30% more in revenue. So that's always, something that I think council always has to have on their back pocket to talk to their community, to their residents, just about how the market change of values, we always adjust for that. It's the non-market change. It's when someone builds something new, does a major renovation, BC Housing comes along and says, this law was $125,000, it's now got a $500,000 home on it, it's now worth $600,000. That's where you get new construction revenue. And so again, a bit of a quiet in our area, but again, consistent. And that always helps us with tax revenue as well, just to be clear. It's sort of like that's new revenue, takes some tax pressure off of tax increases. And so we do have some asks of people looking at trying to get their foot in the market. I know that cost of capital has also been a challenge, and not as easy as it was before to be able to build some of these units, and people getting a bit nervous on extending themselves. Maybe not, if they've got a building of 16, maybe they're only building 4 or building 8, see how those go for sales, get the cash flow going. That's certainly the conversations that we're hearing. Again, significant jumps in the cost of servicing. We talked about just line painting. That's again one that's every year we need to do it. And the bad thing about not having to be able to use lead is that you got to paint every year. Where before they had bad lead, but at least the paint would stay on the road a lot longer. Again, another challenge here is we got to negotiate that same collective agreement that's financially sustainable for the city. And again, of course, I've got the challenge of effectively communicating the recovery of the undercharge on 2023's RDKB taxes on the 2022. Next, please. So here we go. Again, I put this up just mainly because you can't really see it again. You can see that City of Trail relies pretty heavily on taxation as far as where our money sources come from. So 62% of our revenues are taxes. So again, you get, let's say a 2% inflationary increases, taxes is where you're gonna have to go. And it's not exactly a 2-to-1, but you can see where you're more than that. So if you get a 2%, you're gonna have to increase your taxes like 3.5% to kind of get that same coverage of inflation. So one of the drivers here, I mean, again, that's not uncommon. For smaller municipalities that we have, it is our main driver. You can hope you're gonna get more grants, but mostly grants are usually driven towards certain projects or certainly operational things. But again, you can go and ask for more grants, but the likelihood is you're not going to get them. So taxes tend to be our driver. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about assessments in 2024 because certainly over the last number of years, and we'll see that in one of our charts, more of a graph rather than this chart, is that a bit of a flattening of a slight drop here in residential, especially after the past 4 years, we basically doubled. And that's had some of its unintended consequences. You see some major industries had a pretty big jump this year. And the other one that I thought was really key was business. And so business, not only some new business, is part of our new construction coming on, but also means that, new construction is dealt with differently than the BC assessment. BC assessment, they find out how many homes are similar and they kind of look at that value. Whereas businesses are built on, hey, net income, you've got rental income. So that's a positive thing in one aspect, that you are seeing that our businesses must be doing, well, in the sense that BC assessment is looking at some of their numbers and then saying, here's what's happening, your property's worth more in value. So you see that kind of playing out with a 12% increase in business assessed values over the previous year. Again, pretty much flattish, obviously, slight drop there in on residential and yes. Next slide. So there's kind of, you can see we had the hockey stick and now sort of put a little bit of kink in the curve there as far as the top of the 2024, real flat. And you're also seeing down at the bottom there, green being, your class 4 being your heavy industry. You can see that's slowly increasing, and then also same sort of jump up, I said, slanting up, I should say, is your class 6, so your commercial property. Next slide, please. And again, in the same way of 65% of your operating revenues coming from taxation, this is how your taxation in 2023 shakes out. You can see that the major industry, 61-ish%. That is very consistent. It's something that we work with our committee on, major industry taxation committee. Certainly there's risk there. And I know that, but I also know that drawing down what that major industry is would be a commitment from council to sort of have that sharing ratio. Thank goodness, Tech is a great corporate citizen with us and seems to be doing quite well. But you can see very plainly that if there was ever a real challenge with that, that's a risk for our community as well. Next slide, please. And again, another really important slide here. Again, 65% of operating taxes, 65% of revenues in operating come from taxes. Of that 61% of it comes from Tech. Here you can see that out of the tax bill that we send out to people, only 41% of it is actually, of that total pie, is actually the city of Trail taxes. Now, this is on residential home, your average home. Now, some of the reasons for that, again, this makes it always difficult to compare apples to apples, whether or not that's Castlegar, Roslyn, Nelson. I mean, for example, Nelson basically had 25% commercial property, 75% residential. Here you can see we got 61 heavy industry, 10 and 22, I think, for residential and commercial. And so when they've got those types of tax effects as well, police and fire are inside the budget of the Nelson Police Department. Castlegar also would have fire, a different service they have there, but they've all got RCMP, so they would be inside that. Whereas here, yes, we paid a chunk to RCMP, but our fire service were part of that larger service inside of the regional district. And that regional district model is quite a bit different on the sharing ratio of what happens with our tax requisition. So again, one of the benefits for Tech would be the fact that they don't pay 61% of what's happening in the regional district taxation because they've got a different model. Whereas the city of Trail is able to affect the multiplier so that we always keep that sharing ratio of 61%. And then that makes it, again, we are able to make that change. Whereas in the last number of years, you did see a reallocation on the RDKB taxes because they do not adjust the multiplier. So when housing went up, then housing picked up, or residential picked up, class 1 picked up more of a taxation because of those increases. Whereas inside the city of Trail, we make sure that the sharing ratio stays the same. Next one here. So this is something I just thought is really important to talk about because you can see in 2022 that the change of the city's portion of RDKB tax was only $66,000. 1.42%. In 2023, that went up slightly to 200, 4.25% increase. You can start to see now the total requisition as we go along. We talked earlier, we're about 16 million worth of taxation at the city of Trail itself. You can see that we're at 13, we're now at 14. it's going to 16. Now, again, that's the total requisition, right? So, and sorry, this is the total requisition for only the services that trails part. And we'll have to see that listed, but couple important things happening here in the 2024 year, not a bad thing. 2025 is the one that we need to make sure that our citizens are aware of and what's happening and why that's happening. So but again, I think it's just really important to talk about it. We do have our director here who will carve that table, but I think it's important for us to discuss it, my role as well, just to make sure the community hears about it and sees what's coming down the pipe. So one of the things that we talked about, because obviously taxes being a factor, the communities want to know kind of what are we looking at for a tax increase, and we're not quite there yet. But one of the things I wanted to just talk about was 2024, the average single family dwelling assessed value is 382, and in 2023 that was 387. So you can see we're again that kind of flat, slightly lower, and looking at just the city of Trail annual tax effect. If you were to increase taxes by 5% on that average home, that's gonna increase about $52. You can see if it's at 4, you're at 42, 3%, you're at 32. Just kind of giving you a sense in this year on where that will lie. I'd say that, maybe 5 is gonna would be a bit high, depending on when numbers come out. 3 is probably gonna be low. We're gonna be in that kind of range. I would suggest that we come to council with some numbers in that range, but just giving you an understanding of kind of what the effect is. RDKB taxes, you can see that in 2024, that $500,000 increase that we saw from the services, gonna cost your average single family dwelling about $50. Now, one thing that's key here is that at the same time, and again, we'll see through the different services, regional district has taken on our garbage service. So the fact is that each home was paying about $146. Now they're paying 28, so there's been a drop there, a good $120 sort of drop on your garbage bill for each residential property. But, they need to increase their budget because they're now taking on all of the collection of garbages. Now, again, they're doing it efficiently because they've got one truck, dual compartment, picking up both your organics and your garbage, so that's sort of in that budget. But in one sense, if you were to lay out those numbers, when we get to the next stage and we talk about what's a change year over year, we're going to see something like, well, if RDKB cost me an extra $50, actually, paying 120 some odd dollars less on garbage. And again, we'll see some of those increases going into the future, but it will take a bit of a sting, I think, out of what's going on, is the fact that they've taken on that service. Like I said, we'll talk about those numbers in a bit. The bigger one here is that in 2025 on that average single family dwelling, the 2025 increase right now, proposal will be about $262. And that's it, assuming here that the assessed values don't change much year over year. And again, just noting here, when I talk about that 2024 increase from $50 goes to $783, that's to be clear that that's what $733 should have been, what a residence, average single family dwelling resident should have paid for their RDKB in 2023, but my mistake caused us a tax break of $95, which we will recover in 2024. Next slide, please. So here's our 2024 services, and just sort of mirror that differences. So again, you can see in 2024, we're hitting 16 million. So actually, same year that we're in here, we're going to be the overall collection for the whole city of Trail. And again, we do our partners. This is not just everybody. We can see where the increases coming from. General opinion is up. Part of that has been because of some of the dam revenue has been allocated inside East Side 7, so the East Side 7 gets the benefit of that. That's something that has a change over a number of years ago, and that coming out of general revenue. So when I say general revenues, that means again paying for your CAO, your corporate officer, different admin costs that would be shared. So remembering that the RDKB is both kind of east and west. And so one of the things that would have been a challenge in the time when the dam revenue was barely focused on more of the east side here is that would have had an offsetting cost to those on the other side of the boundary. So again, some of those is starting to get some catch up because of what's happened with those decisions previous to, our terms here of that reallocation of dam revenues. Another one there is that S0110, which is the regionalized solid waste management. You can see it's at 392,000, 20%. They changed, but of course, that's because they are also now taking on all the GFL contracts for, dealing with garbage collection. Fire protection, again, we got a new truck coming, a new ladder truck, which should be here this year. Again, they've also got cost pressures on labor. Again, S700, you'll notice that one there has a slight increase, but that's gonna be the focus of 2025, and we'll talk about that. East End Transit, so, part of that is the fact that, that the transit exchange, dealing with, some reserves getting low, and the fact that we're adding more runs. I took the bus actually the other day, and, seeing the amount of people that got off in the morning, from Trail at the Castlegar station, it was standing along. I was really quite surprised. I knew there was a problem coming from Nelson, but to see that, and I think that also just the cost pressure, of housing and, Trail not being hugely different, but being less expensive, I think that that's starting to see a lot more students coming to our area here. So part of that is, the West Kootenai regional. So if you're gonna add an extra line in coming from Nelson to Castlegar, you really need to match with something from Trail. So I think we've got a couple more runs coming, so that should take some pressure off. And it also should be beneficial for our community, especially for those I know in Nelson that need to come over to our area, especially to get to the hospital. So, but that's where those cost pressures are. So you can see that, where those changes are, and if we go to the next slide, please. So here's where that 565 increase, you can see what portions that we pay on. So you'll even notice that our S004, the building inspection, we're actually going down slightly. Well, that's a bit odd. Well, this is all predicated on numbers. So, building inspection is one that we share with places like Say Big White. And so if they've got a big boom on construction, then there's sort of a formula that they wait a couple of years and distribute on who shares and what the cost is for building inspections. So sometimes there's a little bit of an after effect. And so if the budget building inspections going up, we're actually seeing a drop for the city of Trail residents this year. You can see though, we are a bigger partner in things like the East End Transit and fire protection, of course, because we have the larger of the assessed values in the East End 7, I would say that just our property values means that we carry a larger freight on whatever services are combined. I'll give the next slide, please. So here's 2025, and you can see that we're going from 16 to 21 year match. And we've got a couple of big jumps again, general admin, where we've been trying to kind of use in some of these losses of revenues. You can see there's a big increase there. Regional solid waste management, as that program gets going, you can see it's got a big jump. Emergency preparedness, again, another large jump there. And the fire protection. And then the big one is the East End Regional Sewer, so $1.8 million increase. Now that's because they're finally about to get going on the successful grant that we received that gets us getting our sewage treatment plant, which again is quite positive, the fact that we work with Ross and Edward to work with them for us, and we do share in that. And again, on our set values, we carry about 67% of the cost of that. But we need to get that old system needs to be upgraded. So now the challenge, of course, and then we'd be no surprise that when you were getting this grant and the cost of the project in 2020, well, 4 years later, that cost has jumped significantly. And instead of having sort of that 67 cent dollars on the grant, you're now pushing down more on that 50. And so that gap means we need to borrow money. And of course, interest rates with MFA are significantly higher than they were before, and you start borrowing that over 30 years, and we start to see some cost pressure there. And then also a cost pressure that's related to the facility, but then, the operations of it as well. So that's the one there that certainly in 2025, that's what sort of hits. looking at 2026, because they do a 5-year budget. And one thing that, is important, I think, for council to know is that in March, when the regional districts have to have their budgets done and complete, and because we are, talking about seeing on the slide there, how much of a portion the regional district plays in our taxation, we get to see their numbers earlier and get a sense. Again, these are all in that proposed stage, there still could be some tweaking, but, and obviously with 2025 coming, I just want to get out in front of it, make sure that people are aware so that, when you're talking in the grocery store and someone says to you, well, I see that RDKB taxes are going up, you say, yes, but we need to be in compliance with our sewage treatment plant, and the effluent that we put back into Columbia. We got we're gonna have a great product when it's finished, and it take a couple of years to build, but we'll be, having much better technology dealing with our product there, and again, it should be something that can last again 50 years, that sort of thing. Next slide. And this is here just again, kind of showing, when it was 1.8 on S700 there, second from the bottom, you can see that increase, the city traffic's at 1.2, that 1.8 cost. Again, there, you want planning development, you see we're actually getting a little breaking with dollars. Not gonna help as much, but again, it just shows you where you're sharing sometimes and who you're sharing with. Next slide. So this is one that I just thought was important, when it speaks to just on that, visual, is that with what's happened with the increase in assessed value for major industry and for business, you can see that city trail resident is now picking up 48% of the cost of the RDKB request. Businesses jumped from 16 to 17, and heavy industry has come up 1%. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see that in 2023, because the value of residential was going up so much each year, that residential was picking up 50% of that, heavy industry at 29, business at 15. And so not, we just showed you relation wise, because obviously residential, if you look at those assessed values, still is the largest driver of assessed value, but we do see that there's a bit of shifting. And then the last slide here is just kind of showing you what in 2021, is where a lot of this big increases in assessed value, you can see that residential is picking up 42%. And heavy industry was at 37%, and business was staying the same. So you can see within a very short period of time, how much of that RDKB taxes has or been reallocated to the residential. So that's the end of kind of my presentation. I didn't want to take some questions of Mr. Wilson.
Commissioner Enter.
We're not closed.
Hey, greetings.
How are you guys?
Very well.
Sorry.
Certainly willing to take some conversations, when we meet next time, we'll be a bit tighter on sort of what we're seeing for year end. And also tighter on what we are seeing from our budgets and how things like this for this break that we're having on this, but also giving a sense of where the effects will be on employment. Because that's gonna be a big driver for us to getting a better sense of what that looks like. The other part that I would hope go to come to council will also be is a sense that we're gonna have some surplus, and how do we use that? I know that when we were doing our utility budgets, we did notice that the water fund needs some love, and we were looking at trying to move some money there. That will be an opportunity for council to make a decision as we're getting the year end wrapped up and ready for budget. There could be some other things that council wants to put that money towards. Again, we're not finished, but I feel pretty confident when I look at the numbers that we're gonna have some additions, some surplus that we can have some further discussions on what that looks like. I always speak to, even if it goes into the federal reserve, it's a great place to pick off one-offs. So if you want to do, hey, would like to see a planning document on this, or I'd like to see let's buy this or pay off this debt or something. That's a really good decision with those sorts of revenues. It's not a good decision as much as it can be attractive to say, well, let's not have a tax increase as much as we do. We'll just sort of take some out of surplus each year, because that is the bad decision. Might be a good decision for a year or two, but it's a bad decision future wise, and so, but I will have more conversations about that, but again, stop talking for a bit and let's see if we've got any questions.
Is there any questions from council?
Can I get that handout? So I see everyone looking at
You got a few minutes to get through it before you get started.
Do I start from the beginning?
Yeah, you guys pick it up.
You can watch it, you can watch the video when you get home tonight. Okay?
It's all good. It's all good.
And again, just remembering, I'm always available for someone to stop in if they've got questions, that pop up later as you're looking at things, but,
Thanks, man.
Mr. Butler?
One more question.
Sure.
Just on that, the differences between the 2024 and the 2025 request from the regional district.
Yes.
What about smoothing it over a little bit more? Is that not something we could look at doing? Like,
That we could? And when you say that, meaning,
start the paying now.
in, I guess, sort of almost like collecting more on, like charging more on our taxes and then kind of putting it into reserves sort of thing.
It's an interest on it with these high rates.
Interesting concept, interesting concept.
It's a significant
Yeah.
jump in 2025, and it's gonna be quite noticeable
Yes.
into the residential homeowners.
Absolutely.
So I'm just thinking if there's a way to blend it.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't become so significant in 2025.
Right? Okay.
And then the other question I had on that is, does this mean that, because this has been a game of catch up for this sewer system for years now?
Mhm.
Does this mean construction will be commencing now, or are we gonna have like in 2025, well, construction costs are actually $10 million higher than they were in 2020?
We haven't quite found out, but I think the goal right now is to be able to start construction
Mhm.
in the spring. That's the hope,
Because
because
it
again,
seems to like be one of the biggest obstacles.
Absolutely.
But catch up.
more to come on that,
Okay.
but yes, we should know better in the next number of weeks here, kind of what the plan fully is, but in looking at what they were doing last year, this was sort of the goal, and as long as kind of engineerings and contractors and that sort of things get lined up, and I think that's the goal.
Okay, I'd just like to say that I like Councilor Butler's suggestion, if that is something to do, just to don't give everybody the hit next year, or the year after, when, as everybody's mortgages are coming due.
Yeah.
And their increases and their interest rates are adjusting as well, when someone's at a 2 mortgage, when they're up for renewal at a 5%, maybe 4.5%, that still is a significant increase in people's monthly incomes, so we should look at that. I also wanted to just inquire, so the fire protection, the $500,000 increase, is that because of the new truck that they had to buy?
It is part of it.
Okay.
It's not all of it. Part of the drug is so, sorry, yeah,
Their contract is up as well. So I think they're factoring some of that, because they're, what's the wording, Mr. McClure, they're connected with, local
Vancouver, yes.
out of Vancouver, so the rates that they get spill out through the province, so that has not been.
Because they're officially BC, PFSA.
I get that.
They have to go through they're in the same pay wage as Vancouver and whatever, and we're the only ones in the region that have paid full-time fire department, correct?
You have a combo, yes, but you're part of it then, and as far as IFF, they were able to negotiate in that they're parity with whatever happens in Vancouver, so a lot of times.
That's the way they.
Is that they wait, sometimes it can be a bit of a delay as, who's going first and sort of they're very, very well, knowledgeable, the IFF on how they work with their contract. So there's, but
No, and
wages is part of it.
Yeah.
Again, ongoing costs, whether it's equipment, fuel, the calls that they've been on is, you know, it's tough. They've also got staffing, trying to figure out how do they staff.
Just add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
There's, lots of different departments, so to speak, that, when I say departments over the regional district, where these increases are coming through, and whether it's at the board level or the East End Services. There is communication and dialogue going on right now that, may change some of the numbers.
Great, yeah, and that's why I tried to make sure on mine as well that these are proposed, right, when we look at these, and this is coming from my, my counterparts at regional district. I asked, can we share this, whereas obviously it's public, you could listen, you could sound like I'm telling things out of school, but just, I know that there was discussion last meeting, hey, can we look at this, can we do that, and not all that will be reflected right now, but they did share, on Friday, sort of where they were seeing the numbers, at least for 2024.
And I have just one more question, and Terry, you might be the one to answer this in regards to the East End Transit. Is the new, have we seen the numbers yet with this proposed amount for the new contractor? Like, does that have something to do with the fact that there's a new contractor that has been, assigned to the contract in our area? And has that had an increase in funding in our area?
Where that has not, I think it's the 98 line that Ms. McClure was referring to, and the transit exchange in downtown.
Yeah.
Where a lot
So
of it.
it's the additional runs,
Right.
and then they were also noting that, again, this is one of those policies that, you'll notice as things numbers have changed over time as you read through the cycle of RDs, I should say, the timing of when there's increases and when there's drops. Is that sometimes the use of reserves, can give you a sense of that you can use a reserve and use a reserve and use a reserve. And all of a sudden, there's no reserve anymore. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, now we need to have an increase. And so you haven't always been getting, and again, there can always be good reasons for that. But they use it, but all of a sudden, your attention should be equivalent. Oh, hey, we need to increase rates because we have an reserve.
Did we get much feedback from the increase, the 2.5% on the utilities, for the service charge?
Yeah,
Did we
we
get any comments
had
or-
a few,
Yeah.
For the most part, people have been very understanding. Certainly when, you're talking with the staff downstairs, they will note that someone will say, why, and they say, well, this is something that is costing the city a lot of money, and it has, it can be a benefit for yourself, but then that charge is then being carried by the rest of the people who don't pay by credit card. And again, I think just the good talking points of we're one of the only municipalities in the province that even actually allowed full credit card payment without any fee, and or even allowed it to be used for both utilities and for taxes. It was always interesting when they said, it's always interesting, staff would say, we would get, like, can I use my credit card? Is there a fee for that? It's like, no, it wasn't in the past. Oh, well, here you go, kind of thing. And so now it's been more, hey, we've got it, signs up, can't use it, and there really hasn't been much feedback on that at all. But a little bit, yes, for sure, there's been a few people that aren't happy. I think that we had someone come in to pay their entire bill with $5 bills because the city had taken away the ability to use a credit card, so the 2.4, so they provided their $780 bill in fives. So
Seems like more effort for them.
well, again, people do strange things sometimes when they feel that they've been saved by that. So that is just one, that's a very one-off. People have been great.
Thank you, though, good reminder for
Plus catch up.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. So regards to any discussion, I know it came up in the past about maybe doing up a monthly kind of installment for property taxes.
Yes, so I have actually engaged a contractor that is helping with a few things while I've been kind of down on my finance team. And that is one of the directions that I've given them is to look at a plan because Nelson does it, Roslyn does it, and so does Castlegar. And there's different ways of doing it. But my goal was to be able to have something we could communicate out so that when you pay your 2024 taxes, that you could start kind of in that July, maybe end of July timeframe, that you would say, okay, here's my taxes. I'm now gonna, be able to do that. And so that individual is working on what that is. And so that's my goal is to roll that out. By the time we did some of these things, the goal is to have that available for property taxes starting in July of 2024 for 2025 taxes. And then we would have a similar type of program underway for utilities as well, that we would start to get that going.
Thank you.
So maybe just to put a different hat on here, like, it's an interesting question and process of how that whole works on the backside for banking, right? And, I think historically, it gives the consumer the least amount of control over their finances to set up that kind of a system. So I think it's important that that gets remembered. And like most banks and credit unions, mortgage brokers have all been encouraging clients to set up a reoccurring bill payment to the city, right? Which they can then control. Like if you don't have money coming next Friday, you can turn it off and push it ahead by 2 weeks. Where the pull system, if you don't make it, then there's $27 in charges, $100, you know, so like it can get a real slippery slope. And the other thing too is when you go to sell your home, if you don't inform the city of that, they'll keep going. And the city keeps on taking their money quite happily. So there's actually there can be actually quite a bit of backlash, and some of the larger municipalities have actually even taken that system out as a way of collecting money because of those negative. So it is an interesting shift that's happened in the banking landscape in like the last like sort of 7 years with that kind of a payment method. And I think that's historically why Trail also hasn't had it, because of complaints that were received by, you know, I got charged by I didn't have money in there that afternoon, and that you guys took my payment, and now my bank's charging me $75 in NSF fees, and I want that reversed. And so, yeah, where the other way is putting a lot more control into the homeowner,
Makes sense.
right? So like, just that's my 2 cents on it, and like, but yeah, I mean, it's still something we could explore, but I think a lot of communication too around the ability to do it, like in more current or modern methods.
No, I agree. You know, and paying by text, you know, so these are the things that we're trying to get, you know, going on with things. But I think having it available as an option certainly has been some of the comments that we've had. And we're one in our region that we don't have it. And so I think that we would like to be able to make it as an option. People could choose. And they said good communication on, do you know how here's your different ways of paying. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions today for Theo McClure? Well, I think it's awesome that we're so far along this year.
Yeah, yes, me too.
Yeah.
And just more good news. I thank every day that I'm place to keep coming to work, so, or you could say general manager, but.
Thanks, everyone. So next on the agenda is adjournment. Councilor Martin, Councilor Hanson, all those in favor? Very unanimously. Thank you, everyone.